Welcome to the Give Me Liberty podcast of the Standing for Freedom Center at Liberty University, where we defend life, liberty, and truth to ensure the foundations of freedom exist for the next generation. And I'm joined by somebody who's very important to the cultural conversation, what's going on around the nation, really around the world. It's Chris Elston, also known as Billboard. Chris, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
Man, it's great to see you.
Yeah, we've been on a fun adventure the past few years.
Absolutely.
I run into you here and there.
That's right. And you were on the front lines. I mean, literally, you're showing up on the street, like man on the street, with your signs. I so appreciate you state the obvious. You state it out loud. It's amazing in 2024, the kinds of vitriol and even violence. You've suffered violence as a result of taking these public stands for children.
Yeah, I have. I've probably been assaulted 36 times or something. Honestly, I don't love talking about it that much because I don't like scaring people, but there's ways to do this safely. But yes, I've certainly incurred some violence. I've had my arm broken, and I've been arrested a couple times after getting assaulted by Antifa because it's easier to get rid of me than it is to get rid of the violent mob. I've been banned from walking on the streets of Vancouver, Canada. But curiously, most of the violence happens in Canada. I've had an easier time in the U.S., and the police treat me a lot more respectfully in the U.S. as well.
Yeah, well, that's at least somewhat encouraging to know that they do. You go around the nation. You're Canadian, but you go around the United States. We were talking a little bit off camera. Why is it so important to get this right when it comes to the medical community, when it comes to education, that is protecting our children's innocence, overturning and even pulling the cover off of gender-affirming care, the transgender movement, blowing the whistle on this? Why is it so important to get it right in the United States?
When the U.S. fixes this, and we will together fix this, we will get the medical bodies to finally acknowledge truth. But when the U.S. fixes this, the rest of the world cannot help but take notice. It's easy to ignore Switzerland or Sweden or Denmark, but you can't ignore the U.S. Russell Crowe gave an interview with Joe Rogan recently where he said the U.S. is still the beacon for freedom and for truth in the world. And so if that ever fails, the whole world's in trouble. And when it comes to freedom of speech, for example, which is also a huge part of what I'm doing, we need to preserve that. And the left want to attack that. I'm on a global mission. I've been all over Europe. I've been to Australia. I'm actually suing the Australian government right now over a freedom of speech issue because they censored one of my posts where I criticized a woman who says she's a man. This woman was tweeting out, her own naked, mutilated body, pictures of bestiality even. And she's not a medical professional. She's just an activist. But naturally, she's been appointed to the World Health Organization panel of 20 experts to write healthcare policy for trans-identified kids and adults. And this is not someone who should be doing that. She's deeply unwell. And I wrote this post calling her a woman because she is, and it was just a critical post. And so in Australia, they have someone called the E-Safety Commissioner, whose job is to censor the internet. And they ordered X to take down my post. Elon refused. I filed an appeal with their tribunal because it's geo-blocked down there. And then Elon filed an appeal. So now we're working together on this freedom of speech issue down there. And we see problems all over the world, like in England, for example, where things have gotten totally out of hand. People are being put in prison for social media posts. And the one benefit the U.S. has over the rest of the world, in my opinion, is an extremely strong constitution. Now, I know Democrats try to ignore that all the time. But your constitution is incredible, your First Amendment, followed by the second, of course, to keep the first one. And as long as that's here, I have a lot of optimism for the entire world. But if it fails here, it fails everywhere.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it can't just be a piece of paper that safeguards itself. It requires a moral and religious people, right? That's the necessary fundament for a constitution to continue. So there's a lot of focus on schools, on the next generation, raising up our kids, training them up right. Moms have a big role in that. So do dads. And this is why I love this conversation. You're a dad, you're a father, I'm a father. It's so important that we defend their innocence. Everything that we're seeing is preying upon children who should not make decisions regarding their gender. But they cannot make decisions when it comes to voting or buying a firearm, and you think about any number of things. They can't buy spray paint without showing an ID. I mean, there's all kinds of examples where kids can do certain things, and yet there are school systems across the country where they want to transition a child without the parents' knowledge, without the parents' consent, keeping that quiet or hidden from them. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, my friend Sonia Shaw, who's the chair of the school board in Chino Valley in California, they just passed a policy this year mandating that schools inform the parents when the child is socially transitioning with the new name and pronouns. Gavin Newsom responded by passing a bill. It's now law that school boards can't require schools to tell parents when their child has what is diagnostically a psychiatric condition. This is still in the DSM-5. So now we're hiding psychiatric conditions from parents. But not just that, these schools, these 24-year-old teachers who just got out of gender studies class in university a couple of years ago, are now engaging in what is a psychological intervention on this child. Yeah. They're practicing medicine for all practical purposes on children who don't even have gender issues. That's the umbrella term. Gender dysphoria is this umbrella term for kids with autism, kids with sexual abuse, other abuse, trauma, kids in state care. It's all the struggling kids. That's all it is. Gender's not the issue. It's all these other things that are making them uncomfortable, but we don't treat those. We treat gender as though it's the source of all these other problems, and we ignore everything else. You have these kids with severe psychiatric disorders. They have multiple personality disorder, now called dissociative identity disorder, or schizophrenia. And we literally have admissions from the trans health professionals. This all came out earlier this year in the WPATH files. These were files that were leaked about the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, where they admit to children who have these multiple identities, where one identity is male, the other is female, and they're transitioning them anyway. Mm-hmm. Because they don't care.
Right.
These are deep. Not all these kids are this deeply unwell, obviously. A lot of these kids are just having body image issues, and it's mostly girls, of course. This is a social contagion. But yes, what are schools doing hiding this from parents? They're giving the child a new identity and hiding it from parents, and now mandating that schools can't even inform parents.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's evil, it's wicked, it's nefarious. I'm going to take a step back and just ask, how is it that you got started? How did you, it's 2024, we often recognize people are doing amazing things. You have the courage to do this. You didn't just start out, with a Billboard 20 years ago, obviously. So what made you get involved in doing this?
Yeah, I joke sometimes my parents had a lot of foresight when they named me Billboard Chris, but that's not my real name. I used to have a proper job. I was a financial advisor, and I've taken the traditional career arc from financial advisor to crazy guy wearing signs out on the street getting punched in the face by Antifa. But I got involved in this because I'm a dad. I've got 2 girls. You're a dad.
Yeah.
You've got another one on the way.
Yeah.
Why do we work so hard? Why do we do everything in our life? It's for our kids. And parents understand, hopefully, when they become a parent, that your life isn't about you anymore. It's about your kids. It's about the legacy you leave for them. And am I going to send my 2 girls into a world that doesn't know what a woman is? Am I going to send them into a world trying to change the sex of children? This isn't a fringe thing. The New York Times reported 2 years ago, 300,000 children between the age of 12 and 17 had been diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Those are just the official diagnoses, normally for insurance purposes. I talked with Jamie Reed, who's a whistleblower from a transgender clinic in Missouri. She says it's probably double that number. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of kids struggling with distress of various means who are being told that it's their gender. And tens of thousands have received puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and especially double mastectomies for girls. The Manhattan Institute, my friend Lior Sapir just reported a few weeks ago, this is hard data from insurance companies, including private insurance. And these numbers are still conservative because it doesn't include private pay. In the last 7 years, 6,000 girls, we're talking about children, have had double mastectomies, and the number is 50 to 179 who were 12 and a half years old or younger had double mastectomies. They're cutting off the breasts of 12-year-old girls. I've got video from Kaiser Permanente in Oakland, California, where a woman named Kellen Lackhart, she says she's a man now, she admits to doing this. They admit to doing castrations of 16-year-old boys, having started the process when they're 15, which probably refers to hair removal that they have to do. These are unwell, vulnerable, very impressionable kids that they're sterilizing and turning into lifelong pharmaceutical patients. Yeah. And we're supposed to call this love. The positive message we should be sending is they're beautiful just as they are. No drugs or scalpels needed. Yeah. And everyone agrees with that. When you're on the street like I am, having tens of thousands of conversations, I have a very unique experience because I talk to everybody. Not one person will disagree with that statement.
So you're looking for a university that's perfect for you, a school that has anything you could possibly need.
Anything?
You want a place that has the programs you want to study, and maybe a few more, just in case you change your mind.
I think I'm going to sign up for the fashion design program.
All right. A place with state-of-the-art facilities. I mean, look at this campus.
And who doesn't love big-time sports?
And great recreational activities.
Okay, now we're on a roll. Somewhere you can hike, slide, strike, shoot, climb, eat, and most importantly, eat. You want a place that takes you to space? Okay, maybe not, but we can teach you how to fly, or pastor a church, or run a business. And all that with a great view? Yeah, I think I know a place.
What's the motivation behind all of this? So we're hearing, by the way, you did talk about, the fact that they would be medical patients for life. Is it a monetary motivation? Is it financial? Is it big pharma that's behind this? Is it Medicaid, Medicare? Is it the idea?
All of the above?
Yeah.
So yes, obviously there's a financial component. You have unethical surgeons making millions of dollars doing surgeries. For a double mastectomy, they're going to get $10,000 a pop. They can do a few of those per day. And it's not just kids getting these. Obviously, the numbers are way higher with 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds too, who are also still very vulnerable. I don't care if the clock suddenly ticks over to the next day and now you're 18, but you've got autism and you've had abuse and you've had trauma and you've been sexually abused. Doctors swore an oath to first do no harm. They're not order takers sitting in the window of a McDonald's where someone comes through and says, "I'd like a double mastectomy, please." Right. They're there to look into the underlying factors and do medicine. But they treat this like order takers and profit. They're profit motivated for sure, but it's not just that. There's no simple answer. This is coming from 100 different directions. It's coming from the government. There are many true believers. This, for all practical purposes, is a cult that has swept through the entire Western world, where these people believe we have a gender identity. Where it is, nobody knows. Nobody can even define what a gender identity means. I've asked this question of thousands of people. They can't tell you what a transgender child is. They can't tell you what it means for a girl to be a boy. And I'll give you a real life example. I was on the boardwalk in New Jersey last year, and this woman was sort of in favor of this, but she was open to having a conversation. I said, "What does it mean for a boy to be a girl?" She said, "Well, girls like long hair and pink and nail polish." I said, "Okay, if a boy likes nail polish, does that make him a girl?" No, obviously. They know how dumb that sounds. Yeah. And so by asking these questions, you can get people thinking, and they start to realize this whole movement is just about stereotypes. If a kid is now gender nonconforming, if they don't adhere to stereotypes, we're now to believe that they were born wrong? Right. What an abusive thing to tell a kid. You've got a struggling child, and now you're giving them this message that they were born in the wrong body, and they're supposed to be something they're not. That's abuse. Yeah. That should be reported to CPS. That's a message of self-hatred. You're affirming self-hatred. Never call it gender-affirming care. It's affirmation of self-hatred, which is what it is. And I don't even call it gender. I say there are two sexes, zero genders, and infinite personalities, because that just sums us all up. And we're all perfect just as God made us. That's the positive message.
Yeah. I want to go back to something that's so well said. Everything you just said there. The Dylan Mulvaney incident with Bud Light. He was out there, as a brand ambassador of sorts, right? As a social media influencer for the trans movement. And what's ironic is, everything you just said in terms of externalizing what it might be to be female. And it's absolutely silly, and yet it's also deeply cynical. The long hair, right? The ostentatious sort of presentation, right? Overly affectatious and in terms of emotive and everything else. Just very silly. So it's like, okay, so let's get this straight. Your vision of a woman is someone who is non-serious, someone who likes pinks and blonde hair and fake eyelashes and all of this. Most women should be insulted by this because it's not, body and soul, God has made each one of us, male and female. And so it goes down to the core of our being, the essence of who we are. It's not just merely what we wear or put on and we can just cross-dress or something and be a different person. But it's very revealing. It is an ideological cult. It's deeply revealing at how hollow these arguments are, how shallow they truly are. The essence of man, the essence of woman, and how God has intricately designed us from the DNA strand all the way out, right? Bone structure, muscle density, all of that, it matters. And yet this cult, which I totally agree with that characterization, this cult would have young people believe that they can just put on a wig or they can just have a vasectomy. They can take puberty blockers and then voila, you've changed the essence of who you are, when we know that's not the case.
Yeah, they're castrating boys and doing penile inversion surgeries. And what happens is these kids with puberty blockers, I don't want to get too graphic here, but things didn't develop down there. So they don't have enough tissue to do the surgery, and they end up cutting out a piece of the child's colon, or sometimes their peritoneum, the stomach lining, to form the interior walls of this neovagina, they call it. And of course, there's huge complications, and people have even died from this. It's just so unnatural. Yeah. And you don't have to come at this from a Christian perspective either. If for non-believers, for those who believe in evolution, or both, or whatever, well, you're telling me that after 1 billion years of the process of natural selection, we need a pharmaceutical company to tell our kids who they really are? Sure. Yeah. Natural selection failed? This whole thing's absurd. Yeah. And they all know it's absurd when you get down to it and you ask for these definitions, because they eventually understand, yes, you're right, this is all about stereotypes. But tomboys are not actual boys. They're beautiful girls.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, I always, ask this question, but in terms of setting the wrongs to right, in terms of kind of a hopeful, positive vision for the future and where we go, obviously we must win on this issue. But where do you see the bright spots? Where do you see light at maybe the end of the tunnel? Or areas where people are responding and your message is resonating with them?
So 25 states have passed legislation to put an end to this child abuse, but just 2 years ago, only 2 states had even started this process. And most of the Republicans didn't want to touch it because they didn't know how to talk about this. And one reason this has been so successful for the left is because they conflate being gay with being trans, LGB plus the TQ. And though there are some commonalities there, for example, historically, if you look at academic studies, a lot of the kids with severe gender dysphoria from a very young age, some of them grew up to be gay. But they've conflated these as being the same thing, and they've turned what is a mental health issue into a civil rights movement. And they don't even want to acknowledge this as a mental health issue anymore. They don't even want these kids to get therapy, because they say that even suggesting therapy is to say that there's something wrong with their gender identity. Why would you need therapy? This is just their innate self, they believe. But people are waking up that This whole TQ plus movement is different than the gay rights movement. This is about child abuse. This is about a denial of reality itself. So even people on the left are waking up. We have now, many countries have done a systematic review of all the scientific literature and shown that this isn't helping kids. In England, there's a report called the Cass Review by Dr. Hilary Cass. It took her almost 4 years to do it. It was done by the National Health Service, not some politician. She's a pediatrician, and she found this isn't helping kids, so they put a stop to it in England. It stopped in Scotland. It's stopping this in Finland and in Sweden, based on medical evidence. And the two main lies that the left always push are that kids are going to kill themselves if we don't transition them.
Right.
And that puberty blockers are reversible. How do you get people to go along with maiming their own children? You convince them that it's either that or death.
Right.
And they've been coercing parents. But that, of course, is just the worst lie ever.
Right. Elon Musk talks about this.
He does.
Yeah.
He was manipulated in that way. There's never been data to support it. I've always known it was a lie. But this year now we do have data. We have a study out of Finland where they looked at 26 years worth of data, 23 years worth of data. And the suicide rate for all these kids going to the gender clinic, even when they weren't getting puberty blockers, is extremely low. And it was similar to a control group of almost 20,000 kids they looked at. And the common denominator was other mental health issues, obviously. So that's a lie. That lie is being exposed. Of course, puberty blockers aren't reversible. That's been exposed now too. But time isn't reversible. You can't go from 20 back to being 12 and go through puberty again. Those years of development are gone. And these are really the only lies that the left has been hanging on to. And it's being exposed. The truth is getting out there. But we just have to keep having these conversations. My whole motto is one conversation at a time, because that's literally what it takes. And it's working. And just today, just last night, was it last night? No, it was this morning. My apologies. Down in the boardroom, down in the ballroom, Sean Fury, a Texas representative, just announced she was leaving the Democratic Party. And one of the main reasons I spoke with her last night is because of all this child sex change business.
Right, yeah.
The Democratic Party has gone insane. And I know from talking to tens of thousands of people on the streets of Oakland, streets of Philadelphia, New York City, all these inner city areas I go to, they don't support this. The Black community doesn't support it. The Hispanic community doesn't support it at all. This is really primarily a white person problem affecting white progressive families because, not shockingly, opinions of parents impact kids. And it's most of those kids. But there's a social media component and a social component, of course, as well. But people are waking up. This is too crazy to last, and we're going to put a stop to it.
It's a perfect example of white privilege. It's white liberal privilege. I mean,
That's right.
Really, you can't get more elitist, really, than that. Chris, I appreciate so much what you're doing, and you're going into the belly of the beast in so many of these scenarios. You've been assaulted, as you say, more than 36 times. We've seen some of the video of that, and it takes courage, it takes guts to do that. Certainly you're standing up for kids. You're standing up for your kids. So we absolutely appreciate your message, and thank you for joining the Give Me Liberty podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, did you find this helpful? I hope you did. Please like and subscribe, share with a friend, and also go to standingforfreedom.com where you can find more content, articles, podcasts, and our Theology of Politics series, all at standingforfreedom.com.